everyone.
Welcome to the Portfolio.
In mainstream media today, Asian Americans are still often stereotyped as either badass martial artists or on the other complete extreme, geeky nerds. But there's a Korean American man who defies these stereotypes.
He showed America and the entire world that an Asian man can be intelligent, strong, sociable, and sexy.
And today we are delighted to have this extraordinary Renaissance man on our show, Mr. Yul Kwon.
The winner of Survivor Cook Islands.
This is America Revealed.
Hi, I'm Yul Kwon. I'm the host of Link Asia, an exciting new program on Link TV. My formal title is the Deputy Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau of the Federal Communications Commission. Someone from my community could be a leader irrespective of their ethnic background. My name is Yul Kwon. I spent my life studying people, technology, and infrastructure.
Hello, Yul.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Thank you so
Welcome.
much for coming to our show. I've been so excited to meet you in person for a long time. And I believe you and Kevin have met.
Yes, Kevin went to the same school I did. He was a few years ahead, but he knew my older brother. So I've always heard great things about him. I've followed his career very closely, and I'm sure he's going to be one of those people who are going to be one of the leaders of our community.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Yul. But it's really been my privilege actually to have run into Yul on several occasions over the years. But he's just now so hard to get a hold of, and so we're so lucky to have you here. Your schedule's gotten
Yes.
so busy.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you for making the time.
We're excited to hear your story on the Portfolio. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
You were born in Flushing, Queens on February 14th.
Valentine's Day.
Yes,
Valentine's Day.
1975.
And what was that like growing up with Valentine's Day as your birthday?
It kind of sucks, actually. Because what happened is, all my friends, right, who had girlfriends would go off and do something with their significant other, so no one would be around to celebrate my birthday.
Oh.
And people would always ask, growing up, I was kind of a shy nerd, right? And so people would always ask, do you have a girlfriend? I'm like, no, it's okay. You'll have one someday,
Yes.
And they say it like it's like science fiction or something, like someday far in the future. So yeah, it kind of sucked.
Oh, well, I'm sure now it must be so nice, though, to have that romance in your life.
Once you're married, it's actually not a bad thing because it sort of takes the pressure off, right? So there's more of a burden on my wife to do something for my birthday than for me to do on Valentine's Day. So it's actually a refreshing kind of thing once you get married.
Yes,
Growing up, it kind of sucks.
absolutely. Now, you were born into an elite family.
Elite.
Your father graduated from Seoul University. And
My father, both my parents came from very humble beginnings in Korea, and my father especially. He was the first one to go to college, and he actually had to fight with his father to convince him to let him go to college. His father wanted him to stay and become a teacher, a local elementary school teacher. And so my father grew up impoverished, and he kind of worked his way to get that education. And then he gave all that up to come out here. And so when we were growing up, we didn't have a lot of resources. We were very financially tight all the time. And I remember my parents fighting a lot over money. But I think one of the things I really learned from my father is that money is not the most important thing, right? I mean, I think from him I always learned that you have to have higher goals in life, that money is a means to an end. And my mom was kind of the same way. For her, money was a little bit more important. But I think from her, she was always very focused on helping other people and helping the community. And I think I tried to learn the best from both.
When people saw Survivor, how you first became very well known in mainstream media, people just assumed that you were a natural leader. And I think a lot of people took that you were just naturally born that way. But we also know that in other interviews you revealed that you've actually had a lot of issues growing up that you've dealt with, and obsessive compulsive disorder, social phobia, and depression. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like growing up like that?
Sure. I think it's funny because when people look at me now, I think they again assume that I've always been very outgoing and very successful. And the reality is that when I was young, I really struggled a lot because I didn't have self-confidence. I was bullied a lot. When I was a kid, I had a lisp, and other kids would make fun of me and push me around. And I learned to become very quiet. I always tried to hide because I didn't want to attract attention to myself. There was one incident when I was in elementary school that really had a very profound impact on me for most of my life. A group of older kids would bully the smaller kids by hiding in the bathroom. And when one of us came in, they would jump him and beat him up. And this went on for a while, and it started getting worse. And at one point, what the kids would do is they would try to grab one of us, hold us against their urinal, while the other kids urinated on him.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
my.
Wow.
And I never got caught because I just was so scared that I just never went to the bathroom, and I would literally just pee in my pants rather than go to the bathroom. But for years after that, I had a condition called shy bladder syndrome, which is a condition where you get so nervous around other people that you can't relax enough to go pee. And this ended up, having some profound ramifications on my life. I couldn't go to parties, I couldn't go to ball games, I couldn't go to movies, I couldn't go shopping, and I basically became a prisoner in my own home. And I never told anyone because it was just something I was so embarrassed about. I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my friends. I did everything I could to hide this problem. And I started developing other problems too. I had a form of social anxiety disorder called social sweating, where anytime I felt that people were looking at me, like in an interview or if I got called on in class, if I was meeting someone new, I'd basically have a panic attack and I would start sweating uncontrollably. I mean, it wasn't just like a light sweat. It was like I would drench my clothes in a matter of seconds. And it was so humiliating, it was just so embarrassing when people look and say, "What's wrong with you? Are you okay?" That I started avoiding people. And so this went on for years, It really took me a long time to develop the confidence to try to overcome some of these problems.
And adults didn't notice any of this? They didn't notice the bullying? It's
No, I kept it quiet, and I tried to hide that because I thought that my parents would think that I was a source of embarrassment. I didn't want people to think I was weak, and I didn't want to get picked on even more by
Sure.
ratting anyone out.
I mean, today there's a lot of discussion about bullying in schools. It's really become part of the consciousness of education
Yeah.
today, and so you will be excellent to speak about this to students and to your daughters, your daughter.
Yeah, I've been talking about this much more openly, and I
Yeah.
think the situation has changed fairly radically from when I was a kid. Nowadays, there's much more awareness that bullying is a problem. There's much more of a cultural ethic against bullying. A lot of schools have implemented some innovative methods to prevent bullying. So I think it's really become something that's very valuable and sorely needed because today, in the world of social media, there's so many other ways to bully other people, 24/7. So I think it's good that we're starting to really focus on this issue.
And is there
Now-
a way that you could recommend to parents in particular on how they might be able to help if they suspect that their kids are being bullied?
Yeah, I think for, especially for Korean American kids, a lot of them feel like they can't talk to their parents, whether it's about bullying, about social problems, disorders like I had. And that's because I think a lot of Korean parents put so much pressure on their kids to be perfect. And one of the reasons that I've been speaking out more and I wrote a book in Korea was because I wanted to tell Korean parents, look, it's okay to push your kids. Like we all want the best for our children, but at the same time you have to give them the message that you love them unconditionally. And if they're having problems, that they can come to you. And that's something that I just didn't feel when I was growing up. Like now I know that my parents love me, but when I was a kid, I felt like if I didn't get the straight A's, if I didn't do this, my parents wouldn't love me anymore. And that's the wrong message
Right.
to give your children.
That you're pushing them because you love them
Right.
and you want them to be
Right.
happy and,
Right.
and thrive.
And not everyone
succeed.
is perfect,
Right.
And again, I
Yes.
think people look to me. A lot of parents hold me up as sort of like this, paragon of like, what a Korean son should be like. And what I'm telling people is like, look, I'm not perfect either. In fact, I had a lot of problems. And it was harder for me because I couldn't go to my parents. So, you need to be there for your kids and help them through these. And by doing that, they'll become stronger people.
Sure. Now, being Korean, do you think that that had to do with the bullying that took place? I mean, did that contribute to your social phobia, the anxiety? You mentioned in a different interview that we saw that you were embarrassed to hear your parents speak Korean in public,
Right.
that your mother would make kimbap for you for
Right,
lunch,
right.
and that was also embarrassing for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of these issues, were I don't know if they were created by them, but certainly exacerbated by the fact that I felt like I didn't belong. I didn't feel like I was really Korean because I didn't speak Korean fluently. I also didn't feel like I was, part of the mainstream community because I looked different, and my parents had all these strange mannerisms, and like they would speak Korean in public. And over time, I just didn't see positive role models. Like, if you look on television, I didn't see people who looked like us. And one thing that I always tell people is that my big hero was Big Bird on Sesame Street because he was yellow, right? He was like, hey, he was like the only Asian person on TV, and he had friends, So yeah, no, I mean, I felt like all these different factors made me feel like I just didn't belong, and I didn't have a sense of self-identity, and I became embarrassed by the things that made me stand out.
And were there other Asian American kids in your neighborhood growing up that you could at least kind of share this experience with?
I did. It's a funny thing that I've noticed. I see happen is I have some friends who are like the only Asian kid in their entire school, right? And sometimes they have a very hard time, but other times they're actually able to adapt to the mainstream community and be accepted more readily than if you have like a smaller critical mass of Asian American kids or some minority. And then that allows a lot of the stereotyping to occur, right? So I actually think I kind of grew up in an environment where there were just enough Asians and Koreans where, we were kind of seen as like a different group of people, but not enough where we were able to be, kind of accepted as part of the mainstream community.
You had a turning point in your life when your brother's friend committed suicide. How old were you at that time?
It was right around middle school. My brother had a friend and who was very close to, and who basically became like a second older brother to me. And at some point, the friend moved away because his father got a job in a different state. And I guess he just had trouble assimilating and making new friends. And so, my brother stayed in touch with him for, a while, but then his friend became less and less responsive, and finally he just kind of lost contact. And then one day I came home and my brother got off the phone, and he was just incredibly pale and looked like he was just seeing a ghost. And I asked him what was wrong, and he said that his friend had just killed himself. It was just such a shocking event, and I remember thinking to myself, like, how could someone like this take his own life? I mean, he's such a young kid, he has his whole life ahead of him. And then I thought about it and realized, that I think I understood why he did something like this, right? He did something like this because he probably felt like how I was starting to feel, like increasingly alienated, not happy with himself, not happy with his own life, and losing hope that things would get better. And by this point in time, the problems I had, the OCD, the social anxiety disorders, had just become really profound. When you hit middle school is when you become much more socially aware and feel like, you're being ostracized or marginalized.
Sure, your body is changing.
Your body's changing, you feel awkward,
ways,
right? And so it really kind of hit me at that moment that, like, if I don't start changing myself now, I'm going to go down that same road, And because I was already starting to feel like, I don't want to live like this, I don't like myself, and I want this to end. And so for me, it was sort of a catalyst in some way. Like, I realized I have to make a choice, and if I'm going to change myself, I have to start changing myself now.
And you've talked about how you went about changing yourself, taking methodical steps.
What I did was, I kind of made a list of all the things I wanted to change about myself. Like, I kind of imagined how I wanted to be, right? And I imagined, like, what kind of qualities and skills I need to be that person. And I was just really like, oh my God, like, I'm so far off of this. Like, I don't even know where to start, right? I mean, this is like the opposite of how I am in so many different ways. And then I just started thinking, like, okay, look, if I try to change myself all at once, it's going to be too hard. I can't do it. But, the one thing I have on my side is time, right? I have the rest of my life to try to change myself. So what I started doing was every day I'd make a list for myself of things I had to try, like raise my hand in class, right? Or say hello to someone that I didn't know and introduce myself. And the other thing that was important for me is I told myself it's okay to fail, right? And I think for a lot of Korean Americans, we're told that you have to succeed, right? There's no excuse for failure.
Right, we have to learn how to fail.
You have to learn how to fail, and
yes.
you have to be willing to take that risk, otherwise
Yes.
you'll be too afraid to try.
Right.
So what I told myself is that it's important that I try, not that I succeed. And that's how I measure success, that I keep trying. And if you get into that mentality and you keep trying a little bit every day, over time you're able to make some significant changes. Right? What I found is that it's very hard to rely on your own natural instincts or emotions to do something because you're scared, right? But if you actually in advance think about, okay, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do, then you can make it a little bit more automatic. Then you're just like, okay, I'm just doing what I already said I'm going to do, and it doesn't matter, how I feel. And so what I learned to do was just divorce myself, my emotion from the situation, and just focus on what I needed to do. And the thing is that if you do something, sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes something good will happen, and that starts building real confidence, and then it doesn't become so hard the next time.
And then by the time you got into high school, you started playing a lot of varsity sports, graduated valedictorian. In terms of the physical transformation, I think your body was starting to you were starting to work out, taking it very seriously. How did that play into your increased confidence?
Yeah, well, one thing I realized is that it's, there's only so far you can get by just pushing yourself. Like, I mean, if you're just like trying to quit smoking all on your own or trying to it requires an enormous amount of self-discipline and will, and I didn't have that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to get other people to help me. And the way you do that is by putting yourself into different situations and organizations, some sort of structured environment where you have accountability and a community of people who can help you. So I did this in a number of different ways. Because I was afraid of public speaking, I signed up for a drama class, and I signed up for like Model UN, which would force me to like speak, right? But among a community of people that I could become friends with. In terms of like being bullied all the time, I felt physically weak. So I signed up for sports and I started working out. And again, once you have that structured context, it becomes much more easier to do something every day because you're not just relying on yourself, you're relying on other people. And over time, I found that like two things. One, you really do develop confidence. If you do public speaking, if you do drama class, after a while, it's not so scary. The other thing is that you start building a community of friends, right? And friends are the people who will validate you and stick up for you if you get bullied. So once I started playing sports, not only did I become physically more confident, I started becoming friends with other jocks. And I found that these people would stick up for me if they saw me getting bullied.
You were accepted to Harvard and Stanford.
Of course, you made the right choice by going to Stanford.
Now, what made you decide to go to Stanford? Did you want to follow your brother?
No, I actually just assumed I'd go to Harvard. But I went out there and for whatever reason, I just didn't feel, I guess for where I was at that point in my life, I was still trying to develop socially and trying to define who I was and what kind of person I wanted to be. And I felt like at Harvard I'd get a very intense academic and intellectual experience, but I felt that if I went to Stanford I would have more of an opportunity to develop as a person. I met the kind of people that my brother became friends with, and I was thinking if I could be around people like that, I think I could really grow on a personal level. And I felt at that time like they're both great schools academically, and I felt like I got the studying part down, but I still was imbalanced in terms of my completeness as a person. And so I just decided, all right, I'll go to Stanford, and then go east for graduate school. This was also sometime after my best friend had gotten ill, and I'd spent a lot of time, trying to care for him.
Sure. And this is another turning point in your life.
Yeah, yeah. When I was younger, one constant friend I did have through middle school and high school was a Chinese-American boy named Evan. And he and I became very, very close. And he actually helped me in a lot of ways because he was even more shy than I was. And so I kind of started protecting him. And in doing so, I think I found a little bit more courage. We got into Stanford together, and we decided to go to college together, and we rushed the same fraternity, Lambda Phi Epsilon, which is an Asian American fraternity. In our sophomore year, Evan just started like getting tired and sleeping all the time. And I started getting worried about him because I was like, hey, what's going on? You're missing all your classes. So I made him go see a doctor, and they took some blood tests, and then they diagnosed him with a very severe case of leukemia. And they basically told him that his only chance at finding a cure and surviving was to have a bone marrow transplant. And so at that point, I basically stopped going to class. I ended up going on academic probation, and I spent all my time trying to organize bone marrow drives to find him a match.
What is leukemia exactly?
Leukemia is a blood disorder, right? So it's basically cancer of the blood, right? So you have your blood cells, white blood cells, constantly multiplying. People who have blood-related diseases like leukemia, if you need a bone marrow transplant, you have to be precisely compatible with the donor. And in the Caucasian community, enough people have volunteered and registered to become bone marrow donors that your chances of finding a match if you're Caucasian is actually very good. But if you're Asian American, so few of us have registered to become bone marrow donors that your chances are much, much worse. When Evan got sick, we were told that his chances of finding a match in the national registry was less than 1 in 10,000. And so we couldn't find a match, and that's when I spent all my time running these bone marrow drives.
Why do you think there are so few people in the Asian American community?
I think it's a combination of, one, numbers. There just aren't a whole lot of us. But the other thing is, I think this is starting to change, and this is something I've been very active in, but I just don't think there's that sense of community or wanting to help other people. Like when I was trying to run these bone marrow drives in college, most of the first generation Asian Americans I approached said they had a lot of these cultural myths and taboos about donating tissue from their body. And there wasn't that broader ethic of I want to help other people in my community. I mean, Asian cultures are very focused on their families, but there's not this generic ethic of philanthropy. Second generation Asian Americans, a lot of them were just so focused. They had their head in the ground. I got to study for my exam. I got to study for my interview. I don't have time. Or they were just busy partying and they weren't thinking about deeper issues. And so I think that was one of the things I really realized about our community, that we don't have the sense of cohesiveness, that a lot of us, people within our generation, are taught to be really successful in our own careers, but not to give back. And that's something that I've wanted to change. But after my friend died, I made me really think about what I want to do with my life. And I didn't want to live in a bubble, in an ivory tower where I'd have to rely on other people to make a difference way, way down the line. So I thought law school would be a good compromise, because on one hand, there's a lot of philosophy and theory behind it, but as a lawyer, you're definitely in a position to enact practical change and make a real difference. And I saw how during this whole process of my friend, it was very hard to get attention from mainstream media. It was hard to really speak out on behalf of the community. And I thought as a lawyer, I could help represent people who didn't have a voice.
And then after law school, you've worked in a variety of industries in some of the top companies in the world, McKinsey, Google. Can you tell us a little bit about your work experience?
Yeah, again, my professional life, I think, reflects my personal life. Early on, I realized that for me, and this isn't for everyone, but for me, I need to constantly push myself. And what I wanted to do is, because I felt like I lived such a closed life, I wanted to have as many different experiences as I could, working with different people in different organizations, and to really learn from that. So the first half of my career, I really wanted to devote to having a much more diverse set of experiences, and then before I started really focusing. So, I tried to find the best opportunities. I worked at a number of different law firms. I went out to DC, worked for a senator, I clerked for a judge, and then I felt, as a lawyer, you learn a very valuable skill set, but it's also very limited, right? So I wanted to go beyond that. So I went to work at McKinsey and then Google, and then Survivor came along out of the blue. And again, I thought this was another way to test myself and push myself beyond my comfort zone.
The winner of Survivor Cook Islands.
I wasn't that interested at first because I was just thinking, God, this is such a weird thing to do. Why would I go on a reality show? I was on the no-fat diet, no food. I don't think of myself as sexy, and you can ask my wife, I don't think she knows. So I made a deal with my mom. I told my mom, look, for the next 2 years, I will just date Korean women. So after I won Survivor, I got a call from the FBI. Freaking out, I swear to God, I paid my taxes. Really? No, I did. It was terrifying. I'm scared of heights. I'm really scared of heights. And we did so much stuff filming from high, distances. Half the time I was curled up in a fetal position, about to have a panic attack. Yeah, it was really scary. But one of the main reasons I actually did it was, as far as I know, this is the first time that a national TV show about America has been hosted by an Asian American man. It's something cool to be Korean, which is something that I've never experienced before.